communication is key between the client, the product manager, and the vendor. You want to make sure everyone's on the same page at least every couple of days. And not only does that allow the product manager to give updates to the client, but it also allows the client to ask questions.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining again. My name's Riley Davis. I'm the sales associate here at RDA Systems. If you're joining today, the purpose of this podcast series is to help the decision makers and the elected officials of various local government entities see what the buying process and implementation process is like from top to bottom. Again, in the studio is my good friend and colleague, Sean. He's the product manager here at RDA. Thanks for joining me. I won't take up too much time of your day. I know we got a lot of stuff going on and you're a pretty busy guy.
Hey Riley, hey everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. We definitely got some fun stuff to talk about.
Awesome. Yeah, in the last podcast episode, we talked about a few of the very common questions that you might be asking yourself if you had ever considered looking into a new ERP system for your locality or municipality. In today's episode, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into what to expect during an implementation process itself, then ask Sean a few more questions related to the hesitation between departments to switch systems, the price of the new system, and then finally how a third-party consultant for ERP systems might be a smart investment in your new product.
Yeah, excellent. So let's get into it. As far as the implementation process, we've got the discovery process, we've got the training steps, and then we've got the final data conversion, and then, of course, we've got go live. With discovery, we're going to look at the different types of taxes or utilities that the locality is billing. We're going to look at commissioner processes and the number of bills, the number of exemptions out there. We're going to look at, as far as the treasurer side of things, we're going to be looking at payment, payout logic rules. We're going to look at methods of delinquent collections. We're going to be kind of reviewing or shadowing some of the cash store processes that you're currently using in the older system, and how that's all going to play out in the new system. As far as training, we're going to be training in your test site with the new system. So we'll grab your old data, put it in the new system so that you're kind of familiar with those taxpayer names and account balances. So a lot of it will look familiar, and it'll kind of help you learn the processes of the new system a little bit better. That'll also help with some data verification. So when we're looking at, John Smith's account, we know that he's extremely delinquent. He owes $3,000 to $4,000 over the past several years. It's just been growing and growing and growing. If you're looking at the new system and John Smith only has a $50 balance, well, there's a red flag. Someone didn't convert the data right. But if you bring that person in the cash store and you see that they have a $3,000 to $4,000 balance, you can feel a little more confident. Like, all right, this data is looking good. The site looks good. Let's continue with this training. And then we have the final data conversion. That's another way for us to make sure that the balances are correct. We like to compare the new system to the old system, apples to apples, to make sure that balances are to the penny. Because if you're 2 or 3 months into the conversion, and 2 or 3 months after go live, and you're realizing some balances are incorrect, that makes for not so happy client. So your product manager did not do their job at that point. So we want to do that final data conversion, make sure the balances look good, and then we go live. And that's the most exciting part. At least that's my favorite part.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's super exciting, and appreciate you laying that out for us. Can you talk about a few things during the implementation stage specifically that our listeners might want to take note, that have really stood out to you in the past?
Yeah, so when it comes to the implementation phase, communication is key between the client and the product manager and the vendor. You want to make sure everyone's on the same page at least every couple of days. That doesn't mean you have to talk every couple of days, but you want to make sure it's like, all right, we're working on this, that, and the other Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Now we're going to plan on meeting Thursday to talk about what the progress looks like from those first 3 days of the week. And not only does that allow the product manager to give updates to the client, but it also allows the client to ask questions. And I learned that the more questions that are asked by the client, the better for me, because I like to be prepared for go live. And some of the import processes or pieces of information may come to light during those questions. And some of these things, me or another product manager hasn't seen them in a previous implementation with other clients. Every client's needs are going to be a little bit different. Not every implementation is going to be the same as the last one. So you've got to learn to pivot. You've got to learn to ask a lot of questions and try to bring everything possible to light, whether it's a small task or a large task. One of my pet peeves is having to push deadlines. I think these things can usually be prevented by just going above and beyond and to be prepared.
Yeah, it really sounds like it's a partnership, and there's got to be a drive from both parties. That's very insightful. And to even take a step further back in this process for somebody that's looking, how much money is even needed to get started?
So I think it comes down to we talked about this in the prior podcast, but it depends on the size of the locality. If you're a smaller locality with 200 to 500 population, just a couple of staff members, it's going to be much a smaller price range than it would be for a locality or county with a million people living there with a staff of 20. So the way that the pricing kind of works out is you will pay a deposit up front at contract signing, so you don't have to pay 100% of your implementation fees and product licenses up front. You pay a certain deposit up front, which from what I've seen tends to be between 20 to 30% of the total project cost. And then as the project continues and the implementation progresses, there's more invoices set, between 10 to 20% increments as the products are delivered. So you'll set these milestones during discovery. So when the personal property data is converted and everyone's happy with it, you'll get an invoice for that. And then once another tax type has been converted and the balances look good, you'll get an invoice for that. Once all the users are trained up, you'll get an invoice for that. So it kind of helps the locality with budgeting. And if it's a multi-year project, you may be able to space that out over, 2 or 3 years of budgets instead of, putting say it's a $500,000 project. That doesn't have to all be in 1 year's budget. But I mean, after everything is said and done with the new system that's proven in the marketplace, you're going to save time and money with a more efficient software than what you're currently using.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's awesome. Also, just not having to have a huge capital upfront cost when you're wanting to upgrade your system or just get to a modern system. What if the whole organization isn't ready to necessarily change, or you just have some departments that are ready for change, but they can't get the whole ship on board?
I've seen it where a client will purchase just certain modules. If it's a tax department, they'll purchase just the tax modules, and they'll leave the payroll department and the finance department alone. And at RDA, we can help you figure out a process to bring all those entries with your tax revenue and adjustments into your finance system through journal entries or transactional entries, so that if you're let's say you have a software suite and you're just not happy with the tax side of things, you can upgrade your side and have those transactions flow into the older finance system without disrupting those departments. With this day and age and the technology out there, it's not difficult anymore to tie those two systems together and have some journal entries talk to each other back and forth.
Yeah, good to know. I know we're dealing with large organizations in this day and age, or with this amount of people, it's hard to get everyone on the same page. So it's good to know that if someone's looking for change, a bridge can be built, and there's ways to get out of your current system without having to bring the entire ship all at once.
Right. And I've seen it's also beneficial because if, let's say, the finance department is a little leery of getting new software, they can come over to the tax side of things and look at the software and maybe get a feel for it, and maybe talk to the vendor, talk to RDA and say, hey, can we see, we like the tax software. Can we see the finance software or the payroll software? And that kind of opens the door to some possibilities of upgrading.
Awesome. Sure. Yeah. And my next question to dive deeper would be our experience with ERP consultants. What do they do? Why should someone listening consider hiring one if they're walking down the road of a new ERP system?
Right. I think it's a good idea to have a third party perspective. Have someone come in that's seen this implementation process over and over and over, whether it's with small to medium sized localities or large localities. There's people out there that have seen it all. They've maybe been in the industry for 20, 30 years. Maybe they worked for a locality at one point, and then they worked for a vendor at one point, and now they are working for a consulting firm that can use all that experience and help others during the implementation phase. We've worked at RDA with a few ERP consultants in the past. It's certainly not a requirement, and we haven't worked with a consultant for every single implementation. But I've seen the consultants help the client with resource planning and to evaluate the software to make sure it runs as efficiently as possible for the client. So from what I've seen, it's a good investment just to make things run a little bit smoother, so that you can actually meet those deadlines, like I mentioned earlier. Another benefit of the consultant is they can put issues into perspective with the current implementation. So rather than kind of guessing, oh yeah, I think this is probably going to work, they're able to use their expertise. They've seen this type of conversion before. So they'll be able to answer questions that maybe your vendor may not be able to answer. Usually the consultant is involved with the beginning phases during the software demos. I've seen them sit on RDA demos before. And we've had conversations with them all the way through go live. So since ERP software is known to kind of be a daunting task, the consultants find ways to give the audience confidence to look at buying ERP software.
Yeah, no, that's really good info. And it seems like it's almost having a coach or a point of contact that's in direct, kind of like the middle bridge. So that a user or someone that's looking for something, that ERP consultant can communicate directly with the software vendor to make sure their point's getting across correctly.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah, if there's a difficult question that needs to be asked, by the client, and they don't feel comfortable asking the vendor, they can go through the consultant, and the consultant can talk to the vendor about it. Because it's sensitive data, it's sensitive topics. The software lends itself to the client's livelihood. It's their jobs. So, there may be questions out there that the client doesn't want to ask the vendor.
Well, Sean, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you walking us through that. For those listening, be on the lookout for the part 3 of this series of how to buy an ERP system. We should be releasing that in the next month or so. And again, let's remember to not work for our technology, but have our technology work for us. Thanks, Sean, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Riley.